Welcome back, everyone. I haven't even talked about any MacBooks this year, but I have to go and talk about this specific device, which in my opinion is one of my favorite devices ever. These MacBooks are some really good values, especially with these M1 MacBooks. Unfortunately, we're not talking about those ones. We're talking about a 2013 Retina Macbook Pro, which was the second generation of the Retina MacBook Pros of that time. Now, I had the 13-inch, but there was, two different models, the 13-inch and the 15-inch. And I think since that Retina display, it was a killer, MacBook. And I think for a lot of people and for a lot of generations, pretty much from the 2016 model all the way up to even some models that Apple is still selling now in 2021, a lot of those MacBooks had some issues with the keyboards and all that stuff. Now, so for the most part, they've been fixed. But this specific MacBook is still quoted as being one of the better ones. Definitely not the best one ever. I think that's stated for the 2015 one. But this one is still a solid MacBook in so many different ways. Now, this one came out many years ago, so keep that in mind. But when I pick it up, when I feel it around in my hands and everything, I still feel like I want to use this MacBook as an everyday basis. I use an M1 MacBook for everything right now, but there's a lot of things that I miss around this specific device. Now, first of all, on the front, you do get that Apple logo. You get that standard, slim design that's still extremely, thin in this day and age. And it just has such a good heft to it. It doesn't feel old. It doesn't feel cheap. Compared to maybe like the new one, compared to, the newer type of MacBooks with the touch bars and everything, it may look a little bit dated, but I really don't think it's that big of a deal. I think these 2013 ones still look extremely good for the most part. And you still get so many ports on this thing compared to my M1 MacBook that I'm so jealous of, to be completely honest. On the sides, you do get, one side that has that MagSafe port, which is my favorite port of all time. It is one of my favorite things to talk about. I literally miss that port so much. You also get those two Thunderbolt ports on the side, so you can go ahead and do whatever you want to do with them. They're Thunderbolt 2 ports, and there's a lot of functionality. You can connect it to a display, a hub, or whatever you want to do. There's a lot of stuff. You get that full USB port on the side as well, and a headphone jack, which is really cool. And the other side, you get another USB port. You get a full HDMI port, which is crazy, but you also get that SD card. Now, the SD card slot is set to be coming back, as well as that HDMI port. I really don't think the HDMI port is going to be coming back, if I'm being completely honest. However, that SD card slot, if it ends up coming back, I am going to be so shocked. I think it's going to be one of the craziest advancements ever for that specific port to go out and come back again. But this 2013 MacBook has it. Both the big 15-inch model and the smaller 13-inch model both have that type of capability, and I think that's a really awesome thing. Now, the outside, like I mentioned, is beautiful still, looks timeless in so many different ways, and I think the body is one of those areas that I really do love. I think it's one of my favorite things about this for sure, without a doubt. Now, booting this thing up, you do have a little bit of another improvement when it comes down to it. You have that better display, coming from that older 2012 one, at least the standard MacBook, not the MacBook Retina Pro. And this display still looks extremely beautiful for both the 13-inch and the 15-inch. The 15-inch one looks really, really good. Now, there are some different color profiles you can mess with in the settings, and personally, I like the Apple RGB one. I think that's the one it was called. That is one of my favorite display settings ever, and they did change it a little bit with these newer MacBooks, but I think for sure, as I keep mentioning, this is a solid piece of screen. Anytime I looked at it, compared to the iPads nowadays, the iPhones, this Retina display still looks so good. The resolution is still extremely high, and if you pick this thing up, you're really not going to be complaining about the screen at all. Now, I will tell you, it's not an insane amount of bezel, but compared to like that 16-inch MacBook, compared to the newer types of MacBooks, you are going to be feeling like you have maybe not the best looking display, and I think it is important to go ahead and kind of note that, mostly because we have seen some improvements with the newer ones, so it's not like a waste of money to go get the newer ones, but that is one of those areas. The screen itself is good, but there is a little bit of bezel around it, so keep that in mind, but it's not that big of a deal. And you have that front-facing camera as well. Now, the keyboard is another one of those areas that is arguably one of the best things about this MacBook. A lot of people continuously talk about, I didn't really like the butterfly keyboards, and now, I have these newer MacBook, the M1s, and they're great. The keyboards are awesome too. But whenever I go back to my older style keyboards that this one has, I love that clickiness. I miss that feeling. And it's almost as if like the new, scissor keyboards, whatever they call them, or almost like if the butterfly keyboards and these keyboards had a baby. It's like almost good, but not really. This one kills it in the keyboard sense. And you have that trackpad too, that multi-touch trackpad that still clicks in like a button. So it's not like a vibration motor, but I still love it for sure. So that pretty much covers it up in the outside. It still looks very good. There's really not that much to hate on it, and I think the port selection is one of those things that I miss the most about these older MacBooks. Now, internally, there were a couple of different variants of these specific MacBooks. They started off with a 4GB base model in terms of RAM. They went all the way up to 8 gigs, and that's one of those areas that I kind of wish, Apple kind of put a little bit more focus in, but they did change it a little bit with the next couple of generations, so it's not really that big of a deal. You do get that quad-core CPU. You only got dual-core CPUs on both, but I really don't think it was that big of a deal. Most people at that time and most apps in 2013, utilized these specific specs, so it's really not that big of a deal. Comparatively now, it's really kind of pushing it. But I will tell you, I did install macOS Big Sur on this MacBook, and I had a pretty good time. I really didn't think it was that big of a deal. I don't think the 2012 MacBook supported it, and macOS Big Sur I think was a pretty good piece of software that really caused some problems here and there for some people, but for the most part, it was pretty stable. And because of the UI change, I wasn't expecting this thing to be as smooth and as, kind of active as it was. So I think that gets a thumbs up for me for sure. But on top of that, day-to-day tasks that you're still going to be doing on this MacBook, I think are going to be perfectly fine. Of course, if you're somebody who wants to do a ton of crazy things, I'm talking editing a bunch of videos and exporting them and, expecting it to be as fast as possible, that may not be the best thing you can do on this specific MacBook. I will tell you, going up to something like that, probably like 2019 16-inch MacBook is going to do you better. I know they're kind of expensive, or even if you don't need the portability, getting an iMac may be a better choice in the long run. But I think with this type of device, it may be better off if you go ahead and, not expect it to do everything every single time of the day for you. But I think for sure, for basic tasks, if you're a student, if you're somebody who wants to take advantage of all the ports and, have your SD card plugged into one side, a hard drive plugged into the other side, and kind of use it as, a media machine and all that stuff, it's going to be perfectly fine. I personally used a 2014 MacBook for an extremely long amount of time, and I was editing a bunch of videos all the time and doing a bunch of stuff, and I enjoyed it. I had a really good time with it. And I think with this 2013 one, there are some places that could have been improved. I think the RAM is one of those areas that if you get the base model is probably going to kind of, affect you the most, if I'm being honest. If you want to get kind of like that, higher end model, getting the 15-inch one will give you a little bit better performance. But I do think, as I mentioned before, if you're somebody who wants to do some basic things, kind of get, not necessarily the craziest amount of performance here and there, but pretty much get something that's, kind of consistent and, kind of consistently slower here and there, I think you're going to be okay. It's still fairly smooth. Of course, it is a little bit glitchy here and there. It gives you some problems here and there, but I think it's still a pretty decent performing MacBook when you consider the price tag and the age, all things considered. Now, it's not perfect. It's probably on its last leg of software. I'm unsure if it's going to be getting the next version. It might, but as of right now, it's already kind of pushing the outdated cycle. So that's kind of a sad thing for both the 13-inch and the 15-inch, but I think it had a good life. It lasted for an extremely long amount of time, and I think for sure it's a solid contender there in terms of software longevity, but unfortunately it's at the end of the software at this point. But one thing I love about these older MacBooks, as I always mention, especially this 13-inch 2013 one, is that there are still a lot of things you can actually go ahead and improve and increase on these MacBooks. I think you can go ahead and increase the RAM on these MacBooks, which is great. You can go ahead and increase the storage on these devices too, which is another really cool thing. Now, I take that back. I don't know about the RAM 100%, but there are a few things here and there that you can actually go ahead and change on these devices. And I think that's a really awesome thing. It's not necessarily like the 2012 MacBook Pro, but it still has some improvements here and there that you can make. If you want to buy a used one and upgrade some things internally, you still have a little bit of that capability. I did that for my 2015 MacBook Retina Pro and I had a great time with that one too. So that's pretty much just a little bit of an updated review on this specific MacBook and how it holds up in 2021. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count. So it'd mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.